The King of Podcasts Radio Network proudly presents the Broadcasters Podcast, where we dive deep into the media industry headlines and dissect the digital disruption that diverges the masses into the new media counterculture and away from the media establishment. Here is the King of Podcasts.
Travis Scott is under fire. The story that's not going away, and the trials to create tribulations for Travis Scott are going to be huge. And if anybody thought he was going to go and come out of this scot-free, not to use the pun, but it kind of just came as a pun, it's going to happen. This guy now is dealing with up to 400 victims that are in class action lawsuits, filing civil charges, and they are suing collectively for almost $3 billion. $3 billion. So Travis Scott is in a rough shape, and there's a whole lot of stories that go and talk about that, which, I mean, we knew there was going to be civil suits, and there's probably wrongful death. There's a lot of things that are going to be put in this, but I'm no lawyer. I'm going to take what the stories say out there about it, and we're going to go and run through it. Before we get to that, I also want to go and talk about YouTube taking dislikes off of their content, and I got opinions about that. And there's much more. The IATSE, the IATSE, as you know, I've been talking about with the Hollywood unions. They did ratify the contract. There's a whole lot behind that. I'll bring that up tonight. And we'll also talk about, there's a story I kind of looked at, and I brought it up in one of my other programs, talking about that U.S. television news is in dead trouble. So the constant issue of mainstream news is falling apart. And it doesn't matter what side of the fence you are. It's bad. There's that. I got stuff on Moviepass. I got stuff on music's listening habits of music, and a whole lot more. So there's so much to get into. Let me get into all of it tonight. I want to do one thing before we get started. That last week I celebrated episode 200 of the Broadcasters Podcast. And for those that did listen in and check out the show, I'm really grateful that you did. You know, it's one of those things where I've worked really hard. It's a passion project. If you didn't realize, this is not a show that I'm going to be overly monetizing, that I invest in, that is necessarily built to create a big audience. This is really a micro niche of an audience that listens to this program, for those that do listen in. And I understand that. And I always knew that from the get-go. But I mean, I also thought there might be people that might be interested anyway of what I talk about on the program. But one of the things I did about 10 episodes ago is I decided to go ahead and did a little tweaking of the format. So as you know, start of the year, I did have interviews, and I did a lot of interviews during the time, which was fun and good, but I wanted to have more time to talk, because there was just a lot more things going on. I said this last week. Let's roll into this week. So what I did was I started adding more mainstream content for that. So you didn't have to be in the business to listen to the show. If you're beginning to listen in, then you're hearing about pop culture stuff, things that are on my mind that are media related, and I'm bringing them up. So when I've done that, especially since I did the episode about BTS and the chart manipulation on Billboard, as soon as I did that episode, that just blew everything up. Because from there, my downloads have been better than before. That's significantly better. And I'm glad for those of you that have found this show in the last 10, 11 episodes, and you've decided, I'm going to jump in on this, because we've been talking about some content that you would be more interested in. And I'm glad that you have. And so I'm not going to waste your time. Let's get into Travis Scott and the Astroworld Festival that happened and everything that's going on with it. Now, I got a couple stories to choose from. I'm going to start with Billboard. So first of all, there's a new $750 million lawsuit added to already sprawling litigation over the festival. Bill Donahue reports about this. There have already been, at this point of the story, this is the last story I pulled up from today. Actually, this is from yesterday. So which one's from today? This is from yesterday. And, well, okay. I'm going to take the most recent story. And I got it from Rolling Stone. So the new lawsuit, there's one that's $750 million. Another one that's $2 billion in damages. And they are naming Travis Scott, Drake, Live Nation, Apple, and others in the lawsuit. And it's on behalf of 282 plaintiffs linked to the deadly Astroworld tragedy that claimed the lives of 10 people in Houston, Texas, a few weeks back. The lawyer is Thomas G. Henry, and it's a fast-evolving case that is growing exponentially, which was filed initially on behalf of a single concert goer, Christian Paredes, on November 8th. Now, in the story, they mentioned that the lawsuit alleges Apple's multi-million-dollar purchase, promotion, and implementation of its exclusive online streaming rights played a critical role in the crowd control disaster. Because of the fact they were streaming this live, they didn't want to have any issues where they were going to, stop record, or they were going to stop the taping. That everything had to keep going along. The show had to go on. And that's a big mistake. So this is a wrinkle that I haven't really heard about yet. But here's what we have. Apple Music had cameras stands, cameramen, and metal barriers surrounding each. The cameras effectively split the premises both horizontally and vertically by the metal barricades. The placement of cameras streaming for Apple Music's broadcast effectively limited many concert goers' means of exit. And this condition, dangerous as it was, would inevitably prevent individuals from dispersing. To hear that. So because of the Apple broadcast, I would have figured it would just been they had to keep the show going. But Apple, and the way they set this up, they created issues where there were barriers put in place that, you couldn't have any free walking or moving around throughout. I don't know what I never really got to look at what the festival looks like and the whole setup of it, but the fact that these cameras were in the play, and you didn't do a thing where, I don't know if they just set up towers or what, but like they said, you had metal barriers, you had cameras, camera stands, but of the way they set it up, I mean, at this point, why don't you have, drones using the coverage or something like that, or doing something where you get more people on stage? I mean, why are we doing it here? Like, there should be the one main in the backdrop that always gets the main stage. Then you have maybe a jib or maybe a drone camera, more or less, to go ahead and take care of the overshot of the camera or the coverage there. And you get a couple of cameras that are shooting. Like, it can't be that hard to shoot a concert like this. But here we are. Apple did not respond to a request for comment. And then we also know that there was a $750 million lawsuit that was also issued against Scott, Drake, Apple, Live Nation, and others, and this is from 125 plaintiffs from lawyer Tony Busby. And Rolling Stone said that the defendants talked to Busby, and they said the defendants ignored a series of red flags and should be held liable. Quote, when people say, Tony, how can you sue Apple TV, the record labels, and these other peripheral entities? Well, I would suggest they threw in with this. They were promoting this, encouraging this, and profiting from this. It's profits over people, and if the show doesn't go on, people don't get paid. And then no one was incentivized to stop the show, which is what I said. From the permitting process through the final song performed on stage, because so much money was at stake. Quote, I guarantee you, had the crowd attacked the stage or interfere with the performers themselves, oh my goodness, it would have called in every police officer within 100 miles. But as long as the performers weren't in any kind of jeopardy, who gives a shit about the people in the crowd, I guess was the attitude, and it can't be like that. Well, we've all seen all of the words that were, all the videos that came out, on, especially when I watched on TikTok. There were loads of videos out there of all the things that were going on. And here we are. And there have been comments that were said. Travis Scott said in a Twitter post he was absolutely devastated, quote unquote, that fans died during his show. And in a video message posted on Instagram, he said, quote, he could just never imagine the severity of the situation while he was performing. Drake called it a devastating tragedy in an Instagram post. Quote, I hate resorting to this platform to express an emotion as delicate as grief, but this is where I find myself. My heart is broken for the families and friends of those who lost their lives, and for anyone who is suffering. I will continue to pray for all of them and will be of service in any way I can. May God be with you all. So there's a lot. 10 deaths. I mean, this is one of those things you hear like Monterey Pop, like what the Hell's Angels, or, I mean, even Woodstock, I don't even think he even had this kind of issue of the couple of times they did it. So it's bad. Now, Busby, in the $750 million lawsuit, they're saying that the various suits will be consolidated in a single courtroom in Houston under a judge appointed by the Supreme Court of Texas, likely in the next 60 days. This is all bad news for them. And then, as I mentioned in the story from Billboard, I'm going to go back to them. More than 170 cases have been filed over Astroworld. So now they're going to combine them all, and they're going to put all them on the spot. And, I mean, I don't know what they're going to do. I mean, if all these different entities, obviously, they're not going to go and be in together to go and say, okay, we need to go and do something about, negotiating or offering some kind of deposition to go ahead and pay all these claims, because that's what they're going to have to do. But the thing is, I don't know of what these lawsuits are, if any of them are going to be of any filing of criminal actions. And that's what I haven't read here at all, if there is. So the idea is that there will be damages that are being requested. Plaintiffs in a civil lawsuit can seek any sum as they see as appropriate. The final total will be heavily disputed in court, but it's certainly an indicator the magnitude of harm that attorneys believe Astroworld victims collectively suffered. And that the idea that Busby was talking about, the lawyer, is saying that an award in this lawsuit would make an example of all involved and encourage those who engage in such activity to do so with the safety at the forefront and not just an afterthought. And Live Nation, who would organize the event, has not directly addressed the mounting lawsuits. It will, quote, address all legal matters at the appropriate time. And for Travis Scott, his representatives have not commented on the cases, though the star said he was unaware of the severity of the incident from his perspective on the stage. As far as I'm concerned, I mean, Travis Scott, I don't know where his career lies. I mean, I know he just put out some singles from an album, Escape Plan, that did not perform well. And, this is a guy who has made some pretty big name for himself with a lot of songs charting well. I mean, he's been very successful. And his high-profile relationship with Kylie Jenner has only helped. But at such a high level, is he at the point where he is susceptible to be taken down? Could this be something that would threaten his career? And is that what the people want? No, I guess there's probably people that will. I mean, I'm not going to try to compare him to Lil Baby and the issues that Lil Baby had at his concert, but, this, I don't know which one's worse. I mean, what's worse is death. Let's just put it like that. But it's all not good. So in the same vein as the Travis Scott trials being set up, there was also the issue where Kylie Jenner is now being brought down in the backlash because W Magazine, they decided against digitally promoting a new cover featuring him and Kylie Jenner at the wake of the backlash. So we already know that Hollywood most likely and other people are going to probably keep themselves away from. I'm actually wouldn't be surprised if Kylie Jenner needs to go ahead and, put some distance between him and her in the meantime and just keep everything under wraps and just put a low profile down on both of them to see what happens here. But this is going to be an unforgettable moment. And this goes for all the concert goers for any concert now and what happens. I don't want to get into the details of the individual victims. It's not my place, and that's not what I'm here for. But just to really discuss everybody that's being involved. And, this is where corporate entities that are a little bit negligent, and they are very money hungry, they don't take certain things into consideration. The safety of the fans. Because there were a lot of people involved to make money off this event. Apple Music, Epic Records, Cactus Jack Records, which Scott owns, TriStar Sports Entertainment Group, Live Nation, and that's all of them. They all organized this event. And there's a whole lot behind it. Busby also explained that the firm believes, based on its ongoing investigation, that Apple, Epic Records, many other corporations that stood to profit from Astroworld will share legal blame in a court of law. That's how you're going to hurt them. You're going to hurt them in the paycheck, in their pockets, in their wallets. That's the way you do it. And this is not an excuse for what happened to the poor victims that had this unnecessary loss of life. And my heart goes out to all the families and friends of those who they loved that were lost in an unforeseen, unfortunate tragedy that never had to happen. So there's that part. Now, Travis Scott is trying to go ahead and do a little bit of damage control. It's not going to do enough. he made mention of that he wants to be responsible for the solution. That he wants to cover the costs of the funerals for those that died at the concert, as well as therapy and treatment for survivors. There is no level of restitution or atonement that Travis Scott can do right now to save face. It's impossible. Now, I could also say too that, you know what, Travis Scott probably didn't have much control in the whole situation. But no one of these corporate entities even considered the fact of the safety and the health and well-being of those people there. They never considered it. They must have not. When you look at the way things were. Now, there's one thing to go ahead and keep the fans that came to the show, keep them under control. Crowd control was never played. The other part was, of all the things that were going on in terms of these other entities that were coming in that were creating roadblocks all across the venue, which is the other part. Now, as we said, W Magazine, they decided against promoting an upcoming edition that features Scott and his partner Kylie Jenner on the cover. And at the same time, Kylie Jenner is now brought in the criticism of the wake. She's currently expecting her second child with Travis Scott. She was at the concert, and according to fan footage, was safely situated at the rear of the audience in a VIP section with her sister Kendall, as well as her daughter Stormy. And both Jenner sisters were met with backlash in the days after the festival for sharing Instagram stories of Scott's performance that were left on their accounts even after the news of the mass casualties emerged. I mean, if you want to talk about some damage control, for the image and the profile of the Jenners and everything they have invested, to let that slide, to get bashed on social media, yeah, justifiably so. But look what happened here. There was one video that was shared by Kylie showing an ambulance in the crowd. Video remained live on her account for several hours after the news broke of the fatalities before it was finally deleted. Somebody was not thinking here. Kylie Jenner issued a statement on Instagram emphasizing that she and Scott had not been aware of the fatalities until the news service after the show. She continued, quote, "I want to make it clear, we weren't aware of any fatalities until the news came out after the show, and in no world would have continued filming or performing." You know, there's something wrong there when the artist, who is the reason for people to be there, and the artists that are there, that they can't have control of what's going on. When there are too many people ahead of an artist that can't control the situation. Because that's where I can always understand where certain artists haven't very much control. They have to have control of the situation, of their career, of their image, of what's going on. Travis Scott's been in this game long enough to know that he needed to be aware of what was happening here. At any venue, any concert, I would have been up and at it to make sure what's going on, guys. Like, I believe he has the right in his career to make sure things like this don't happen, unless he was neglecting it and he wasn't thinking about it. But if it was me, I'm proactive and I'm very concerned about things. I would have very much worried about all that. That would have been something that would have been on my mind. And if I'm also managing or I'm supporting this artist that's making me money, I want to make sure that everything goes on without a hitch. Right? Now, since the incident happened 2 weeks ago, Scott and Jenner have been staying together at the rapper's home in Houston since. Yep. You better stay under wraps. You're not going anywhere. It's all messed up. And lawsuits aplenty are coming that are justified. Hey, the lawyers, sounds like they want to go ahead and get the most possible of the damages done. Well, that's what you got to do. That's just the way that the court system works. And, I mean, I don't know. Don't know what to tell you. It's just unfortunate. It's sad. Sad to see all this happen. This should be a lesson for those that, you know, when stardom comes into play, that you got to be able to have a strength. You have to have a hold on your career. You got to be able to have a hold on what's happening to you and what could happen and the people that are in charge of what's going on. I mean, regardless of the fact that, okay, you signed a contract, you have to go ahead and perform your duties. You have to do what you're obligated to do. But even then, you have to be concerned. And I mean, the thing is too, is that you shouldn't even want to go ahead and bother to be in a career when you can put people in lives in danger, like things like that. Why even have a concert like that if you have to? I mean, the most important thing is I'm not going to say anything bad about the law enforcement, but my question is, where were they? Why wasn't there? And I'm not blaming, right? I'm not blaming the law enforcement that were already there or security that might have been there. But for an event like that, why wasn't there more law enforcement assigned or paid for an event that big? Because what needs to happen next time? If there's another event, any other large event like this, there needs to be more law enforcement presence and way more security, better trained, better equipped to the situations like this, and to handle things immediately and expeditiously. There is no excuse for any of this. And I didn't really want to say much because I wanted to let all the news come in. So it's been a couple of weeks. We got ourselves here, and now it's done. It's bullshit. And I don't know what happens to Travis Scott's career, but, he's made a lot of money for himself. I don't know how he survives, because I feel like his career is probably going to be in jeopardy, because this is one of those things that you don't come back from. But maybe he will. But he's got to do a lot of mea culpa. And for him, he probably needs to be doing a lot of charity work and probably needs to do quite a bit to alter his image to put him in a better light. But there's a true come to Jesus moment that he needs to come with, and he needs to go and change things up in order to go and save face for the sake of the fans. Because that's the other thing. I mean, I'm not so much of a big fan. I listen to a lot of his music, but I mean, for those that are stans of his, and for some of them that were diehard Travis Scott fans or Drake fans that came to that show, I mean, you want to be extra concerned about what happens to them. But somebody did not follow along, and too many people that were all in the same pot were not considering the safety and health issues and the ramifications of having an event like that and all the things that be required. That's where management comes in of all these companies, and making sure the people on the ground who they're corporately managed, okay, they're being paid probably contractually, or they're probably paid contractors all working this event. So they're going to do what they're being asked to do to comply with a job. So they're not going to be there to consider health and safety or making sure everybody can get around safely and people are enjoying the event safely. So there are things that collectively all these other companies, whether it was the record labels, whether it was Apple Music, whether it was Live Nation, they all needed to have a hand in saying, okay, we need to protect talent, which they probably did, but they also need to go and make sure to protect the fans. You just don't get them there to pay a ticket and not take care of them. With the payment of the ticket, because they have a ticket to admission in, they should be given the right to be given a safe, healthy, and enjoyable experience. They're there to be entertained. They're not to be squeezed around and trampled and shit. Come on. Anyway, that's what I have. This is me. In my thing, this is where I'm at the corporate giants here that allow this event to happen and did not do the right thing for the fans. And then I have a little bit of sympathy for the artist because of the fact they probably didn't have much to say what's going on, but they need to have the stones, to step up and speak up. To come back here after all that happened and just give mea culpas doesn't do it. Oh, to pay for the funerals and pay for therapy, that doesn't cut it either, Travis. You know better. If you don't, you need to grow up. Anyways, that's what I have to say about that. Let me get into my semi-main event story that I have, and that is YouTube and some big things that are going on there. And I heard about this a while back because, there's a lot of things that when you have YouTube having the reset thing that it used to have, the year end kind of thing, and it got so many dislikes, it was ridiculous. Well, here we go. You cannot publicly see dislikes anymore. According to what's the story here is from The Verge, YouTube gives dislikes the thumbs down, hides public counts. Creators, though, will still be able to see how many people dislike their videos. For me, listen, I have seen what I have of my videos. If I look at what I have up online on my meager, YouTube channel, if I look at it right now, listen, I'm not nothing to brag about. I got less than 200 subscribers, but I'm thankful for every one of them for being on with me. Thank you so much. And I've actually gained a couple in the last month, which is really great. But for me, I know that in my content that there's probably not much to it, right? Because when I look at what's going on here, I can say to myself, yeah, sure, I probably have a lot of dislikes that are not of everything. So I get more likes and dislikes, which is nice. But I can tell you there's been some stories, and I can look for it right now, where I've gotten much more dislikes than likes. And I probably deserved it. Like, it's okay. It's a humbling experience to have that happen to you when you're doing videos. And then it's just sometimes you probably just got to do a little better. But in the story here, YouTube announces they're going to be hiding public dislike counts on videos across its site. The change is to keep smaller creators from being targeted by dislikes or harassment and to promote, quote, respectful interactions between viewers and creators, end quote. If you're going to be that sensitive, and I mean, really, if there has to be that much sensitivity on doing YouTube videos, then you know what's going to happen. There might be some people that will be dissuaded from putting content on YouTube, but YouTube is so big, it doesn't matter. So in March, YouTube was announcing it was experimenting hiding the public dislike numbers, and individual creators had long been able to hide their ratings in the videos. So why have to go ahead and go this extra step is the question. Well, the fact is the dislike counts will be disappearing for everyone. Viewers are used to being able to see the like to dislike ratio as soon as they click on a video and may use that number to decide whether to continue watching. Now, YouTube says they were testing hiding numbers, and people were less likely to hit the button to attack the creator. Other social networks have given their users the option to hide rating metrics too. Instagram and Facebook famously let you hide like counts if you wanted to avoid the potential social pressure that comes with having your main measure of success on the platform shown to everyone. Look, Apple Podcasts has their ratings, and my ratings aren't that good for my wrestling podcast. I don't give a shit. And then I have, other shows that I do that might not be so great, or I don't get any ratings at all for some. The Broadcasters Podcast doesn't have any. That's okay. But I think what it comes down to is, like I said, the YouTube Rewind video for 2018 was one of the worst received videos ever. And the Rewind videos after that were canceled. So there was that part. So YouTube is going to be the one that it's really helping themselves for their own content being disliked. Sorry, not sorry. Now, one of the people that actually made comments about this and said this was a bad idea was one of the original co-creators of YouTube. And he spoke out to The Verge after this story. And this is Jawed Karim, who's the third co-founder of YouTube. He condemned the platform's removal of public dislike counts. Quote, why would YouTube make this universally disliked change? There's a reason, but it's not a good one and not one that we publicly disclose. The ability to easily and quickly identify bad content is an essential feature of a user-generated content platform. Why? Because not all user-generated content is good. He goes on to say, when every YouTuber agrees that removing dislikes is a stupid idea, it probably is. Try again, YouTube. But then he also gave a little more of a detailed condemnation. He go on to say, quote, the ability to easily and quickly identify bad content is an essential feature. Why? Because not all user-generated content is good. It can't be. In fact, most of it is not good, and that's okay. The process works, and there's a name for it. The wisdom of the crowds. The process breaks when the platform interferes with it. Then the platform invariably declines. Does YouTube want to be become a place where everything is mediocre? Correct. You want to have that. I love user response. One of the best things that I ever had when it came to movies and going to the movie theaters is Rotten Tomatoes, because we get user feedback. For every restaurant or store I might go to on Google Maps, I go to reviews and read up, and people give me the commentary. Do you want to go? Really, let's just go through some practical similarities. You want to go to a restaurant where you don't know how well it is, and you have no idea before you go in. So yeah, it might look good, the food might look good, but it tastes like crap. Is that what you really want? Do you want to have it where you're going into something and you're not sure? If you don't know what a movie's like, and you're going there by yourself, you're paying full price for it. How bad is it? How bad was it for all of us back in the day when we didn't follow critics out there in the reviews, and then we got stuck with a really bad movie? You know what? I have gone to a lot of movies in my time, and in the last 5 years, I've been going roughly 40 to 45 weeks a year. 40 to 45 movies I paid for full price. Now I have the subscription for Regal Unlimited. I use that. But for me, right, I could say this, that it's very rare for me to catch a movie that really is a stinker. I mean, some of the things where some people go to a movie and they hate it so much they walk out. Like, I haven't done that in a long time. I mean, it's okay to do that when you're watching something on television, I guess. But even then, you can do something about that too. But to go to the movie theater, spend the money, and you realize this movie's a bomb? I don't want to have that happen. That's the best part of what social media and what the internet does, is that you do get real fan feedback. You get real user-generated feedback, not just the content. And people should be able to go ahead and take some criticism. Lord knows I can see. I'll use it. And I get criticized, and that's okay. Just got to have a little bit of an idea that if you're coming in to do content in general, that's what you need to do. You can't just let yourself just be stuck. So, I don't know if there's anybody else, though, that could really compete with YouTube in terms of functionality and usability and just overall ease. Because YouTube, I'm going to say it. There is a lot of content up there to watch. And I still, even with, there might be some, content that comes and goes, but there's still a lot of good content. And I regularly watch YouTube probably about 2 hours a day of all the content I find. There's wrestling content, media content. There's a lot there. And I regularly am watching YouTube. Because talking about one of the easiest places to go and watch some TV, something visual to kind of keep me stimulated and watching something, and it's really easy to get to, and it just stays right there, it works. And there are still quite a few people that do like to use YouTube for their content. So that's why I'm on it, and that's why I enjoy it. All right, let's go into now the IATSE vote. The ratification to get Hollywood to avoid what would have been one of the most majorly hurtful strikes. It would have been a damaging strike that really would have put some real destruction to the industry in general, if not for the passage. But there's some things that go right behind what happened here to go ahead and bring up. So it happened on Monday. IATSE members ratified the new film and TV contracts and rebuking union leaders as LA's deal loses the popular vote. So here's what we learned from Dominic Robb as to what happened. They ratified their new film and TV contracts, averting a showdown with the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers after contentious negotiations that began 6 months ago. And of course, if you want to know the whole story from back in April to today, and even going back to 2019 to today, you know that yours truly, King of Podcasts, has been talking about it here on the Broadcasters Podcast this whole time. So crisis averted. Thank you very much. Matthew Loeb put a statement out saying, quote, "From start to finish, from preparation to ratification, this has been a democratic process to win the very best contracts. Vigorous debate, high turnout, and close election indicates we have an unprecedented movement building opportunity to educate members on our old collective bargaining process and drive more participation in our union long term. AMPTP put their own comment out there. Under this electoral college system, the union uses for ratification vote, much like how presidents are elected, the vote was 56 to 44% out of 641 total delegate votes from the grand total of 36 local unions nationwide that were eligible. Now, among Hollywood locals, the basic agreement was rejected by a very thin margin, 49.6% voting yes, 50.4% voting no. On a Sanders agreement, popular vote was 52% yes, 48% no. So very much those in Hollywood, there was not a full majority on the vote, but it got all the way as far as they could. And of the ballots that were cast, 72% of the entire union cast their ballots this weekend. 63,209 eligible members were able to cast ballots, and 72% of them actually voted. So in the end, there were enough members sided with their leaders, providing a muted win for Matthew Loeb and local leaders who had unanimously endorsed the deal, but the tight result reveals frictions in the union as younger members especially seek stronger actions from their leadership. Now, that tells you a lot that some of the guard has been here, for a long time and know how Hollywood has worked before Me Too. But for all these, really the changes of diversity, equity, inclusion came into play. And real changes in how people were always going to just, run through the mill and just given a grind that was almost impossible to deal with. Well, some people have just accepted it. For those that are older, they've been worried about the fact that let's just get what we need, what we can get from the union and get it done. But the younger group, they wanted to get more. They wanted to get the conditions changed for themselves, but the older guard's not going to change. So now what we know about this is that there probably will be a generational change. So maybe not in the next 3 years when the contract comes up again. What will probably happen is they'll probably come back maybe in a couple of years or maybe down the line, there'll be another crossroads with the unions coming together again to address this situation. Or there might be something that will happen, unfortunately, God forbid, that might cause the discussion to get even further. So that's what we have for that. Now, as for those that asked about what they got in the contract, well, let's talk about that too. The new contract provides a 54-hour weekend rest period as well as 10 hours off between shifts for all workers on all types of productions. The deal also provides $370 million to shore up the pension and health funds, 3% annual raise, significant pay hikes for the lowest paid workers in the union, including script coordinators and writers' assistants who will see their minimum rates rise to $26 an hour by the third year of the agreement. One of the locals, a set painter named Bob Warner, says it was pretty good. Seems from like when I talk to people negotiating it, it's the best we could do without going on strike. In any negotiation, nobody gets 100% of what they want. I'd say overall the gains are pretty solid. Now, there were some that urged a no vote, saying the contract did nothing to shorten work days. 10-hour turnarounds were already baked into most workers' contracts and still allowed for 14 days on set. And then others were arguing that it does not do enough to prevent productions from skipping lunch breaks, becoming a standard scheduling practice on many shows. And the new agreement increases meal penalties once productions go past 8 hours without a break. But the penalties going past 6 hours remain unchanged. And there are no new streaming residuals for the pension and health plan, which members also saw as a weakness. So, hey, you didn't get everything you want. But Bob Warner said what it was. You get what you can. And there were gains that they got. And, I'm not surprised that even though I said they should try harder to make sure to get everything they want and know that the power of their union is there. Well, I mean, they did make a message, but then also you got to think about that maybe the message you're trying to get is not going to be answered in one shot. I mean, for there's a lot of people's lives and livelihood at stake. So for some that are younger, they might not be so entrenched with families and friends and, and children. They might not, be able to go and say that they can just go and take the risk and go for that. And that's what it comes down to. Now, one story that's not necessarily in the same vein, but Hollywood Reporter put out a story about a TikTok star now looking to go into his first movie role and the role of Gen Z in Hollywood. So I wanted to see what this TikToker would actually would say. Josh Richards is his name. And he brought a few things in that sounded really interesting, that just to get a good grounding of where some of these influencers that are going to find their way into some more successful roles, let's see where they're going to come from. Initially, one of the headlines they put up in the story is, quote, "A lot of kids today are taking their dreams into their own hands." So a Toronto digital content creator and entrepreneur, Josh Richards, Toronto-born, has amassed 25.6 million followers on TikTok, 7 million on Instagram, 2.35 million on YouTube. So now he's founded Crosscheck Studios, a production company which business partner Michael Gruen and former ICM agent Chris Sawtell have formed in partnership with Mark Wahlberg's Unrealistic Ideas, forming a Gen Z marketing agency called Hawk Z. Also started Animal Capital, a $50 million venture capital firm focused on backing startups, co-founded caffeinated drink brand Ani Energy, launched a podcast. So there's a lot that this guy is already doing. Now he's into the movie business. And here's a couple of questions that he answered that I thought were interesting. Number one, what do Gen Z creators bring to the entertainment industry? Quote, "I think the biggest thing about Gen Z is we're not scared to ask, we're not scared to do. I think that a lot of kids out here today are taking their dreams in their own hands instead of relying on other people to do it for them or to kind of hand them a golden platter. With old Hollywood, it's a lot of people talking to the middleman and going through all this work until nothing ever comes to be because they toss it around for so long. With Gen Z, they just want to get it done." It's also kind of the thing where we have the talent agents being put by the wayside and for people going into business for themselves, being entrepreneurial when it comes to writers, when it comes to those that are working on deals where they don't feel like they need the talent agencies anymore. And only the talent needs them. Since TikTok and social media apps are saturated with creators, Hollywood Reporter asks, what do you think it is about you specifically that has generated so much business and so much of a following? Quote, "I think it's a competitive that just burns inside of me, like I was never going to let myself fail. It just wasn't a possibility, and that turned me into someone that had a really strong work ethic. I was able to put in the hours that a lot of the kids would." Also asked, "Have you faced any roadblocks due to your age or the stigma of being an influencer?" He said, "Yeah, but I kind of love being the underdog. I think it just adds to the story. And being 18 or 19 when I started angel investing, there were a lot of people that doubted at the beginning. I like to be able to prove people wrong. That's something that drives me in my life. But I really look at it as a tool. I like it. It's a pretty good attitude. And it's got the right kind of idea going." And you can just tell, when I go on TikTok and I see certain influencers out there, you can tell they're just not making money just to spend it and just to splurge. That they're investing. They're seeing the world of crypto. Hell, I'm starting to hear about Web 3.0 now more than ever. Web 3, it's becoming like the new thing to talk about. And so that would be the next stage of the web evolution that would make the internet more intelligent or process information with near human-like intelligence. So there's that coming up. So the internet would be decentralized and based on public blockchains, which I've been hearing that for a while too. Who knows? We might have to go and do something and talk about that down the line and see if there is something there about it. Or maybe I get something on that might actually go and talk about it and give me a little perspective behind it, because I'd like to find out what that's all about. I'm a curious person on this show. I like to learn things. What can I say? So my next story is very concerning, at the least, because of who it is that actually said this. But this was something I saw and really kind of was shocking to read. So a former New York Times CEO has gone on record to say, quote, "U.S. TV news is in dead trouble." He says that the news is in dead trouble as it loses audiences under the age of 60. He used to be BBC Director General and ran the New York Times between 2012 and 2020, describing U.S. news channels as being, quote, "completely unchanged." since the 1980s and saying that the UK has done more to innovate during that time. Quote, and this is he spoke at a Freeview Outside the Box event. He says, quote, news feels like a particularly old-fashioned style of broadcasting aimed entirely at older audiences. I live in the U.S., and TV news seems completely unchanged. News broadcasters' greatest challenge is to reinvent the experience of serious journalism for a smartphone generation, he argued, pointing to the New York Times' growth in broadcasting during his tenure. Shows such as The Daily were launched and attracted huge listening figures from young people who had observers had been saying didn't like speech radio for years. In the UK, the biggest threat of the public service broadcasters came from the behavior of younger people everywhere and whether you're moving fast enough to move or reimagine your great content for them. So he urged broadcasters to make authentic British drama to avoid a global version of the UK that is, quote, very particular to our tradition, public schools, and aristocracy, but doesn't really tell you very much about the actual UK in 2021. But the fact that he said that, was damaging. So that has to be considered too. And when you look at that, he's not wrong. Why hasn't the news changed up a little bit? Why is it that shows like Inside Edition can do the same shtick for 30, what is it, 87, I think, 86, something like that? For a show that's 35 years old, roughly. For Inside Edition to continue to be the same show that people can just put out all the time they want. For, local news, people need certain information from it. The weather is very important. And there might be a couple news stories that might happen in the neighborhood that are important. But local news does do something where they do try to go ahead and change the look, but they think the aesthetics are what going to change instead of the actual presentation. There was a time where you could do things to make the set look different, and then you have this whole like all-in-one kind of look for the news, but really, the presentation of news has not changed. The deflection of the voices of the people on to everything, it's just not good. It's just not good at all. But nobody's even considering that. Nobody's doing anything about it. So what are you going to do there? The news stations, they put all this money ahead, and there's not much they can do in terms of putting out content that's more live or more interactive or anything like that, because they don't have a way to do it. They only have so many live trucks. They only have so many people that are out there that they can bring on to go ahead and talk and to, present the news outside of the studio. So there's a couple of stories left I want to bring up before we're going to wrap things up. I was going to bring up one about in the news, but I'm going to just change off of that. There was an issue where they're trying to eliminate the whole idea where if you want to go ahead and subscribe to a publication, whether it's a digital paywall or it's a newspaper, you can go ahead and click to get signed up. But then if you want to go and cancel, you have to go through the trouble of calling. And that's one of the things that we're talking about with that, which I thought, was an interesting story, but I'm going to hold off on that. Now, I talked about last week about Moviepass making its way back into theaters, and they're going to try to get themselves restarted again. So we got more details this week about it. The co-founder, Stacy Spikes, details relaunch plans. For starters, it's not going to be $10 a month. It's funny. So that's one thing that was said. Now, Spikes spoke with TheWrap.com, sidestepped the question about Moviepass's tarnished brand about the struggling service charging subscription terms after shutting down in September 2019. He hopes to restore the customer-first approach of its earlier days. Quote, at the end of the day, the playbook is great service, great product, reliability, transparency, meeting with consumers on a regular basis. All those things that we did before, but that made the company great and exciting and worthy of an acquisition before, that was radically changing the industry. We want to bring those back. So think of it like this. This is them basically saying, we're not going to be what Napster was. We're not going to disrupt an industry and then just get swallowed up because we couldn't stay alive. They want to go and keep it going. That's the plan. So they said what will be the same is that the app, which allows its users to sync their phones with their Red Moviepass credit cards so they can use subscriptions effectively at any movie theater, that will remain the same. And yes, Spikes expects that to be the time being. You will still have to use that physical credit card at theaters, but the company's new website it may no longer be red. So they might just change the color scheme. Now, they have not talked about if there were going to be any personal information data or emails from the previous regime. So you'll have customers re-signing up from scratch. So you're not going to have the existing base of subscribers that were part of it to get them back to adopt. You're going to now have all new adopters ready from day one. But it did cause premium reward programs and subscription services from all the major theaters, AMC Theaters, Regal, Cinemark, Marcus, Alamo Drafthouse, and Showcase Cinemas. So the new Moviepass he envisions will have options for those who want to attend a single theater and those who want options to visit any theater. He hopes that Moviepass will be able to coexist and even operate alongside some of the exhibitors' own subscription offerings. So there's that part. Now, one other story I want to bring up is a study that was brought up about spoken word audio. Podcasting is spoken word audio and music and how it's being consumed. So a new study came in, spoken word audio report, which was published by NPR and Edison Research. And here's what they learned about. They spoke with over 4,000 individuals ages 13 and up as part of an overarching listening habits study. 1,000 interviews were conducted among those who listen to spoken word audio at least once per month. So they say right now, the amount of people listening to spoken word audio, whether it's on radio or it's podcasting or audiobooks, is 48%. 48% for U.S. residents over the age of 13. Now they break it down. There's AM/FM radio. The parties behind the report stated against 22% for podcast, 10% for audiobooks, and 20% for other. So they did try to break it up between certain devices or certain styles. Now, they also found out that a full 75% of the U.S. online population, ages 18 and up, have listened to spoken word audio content, with 45% of the 330 million residents, ages 13 and up, having listened to spoken word entertainment daily. So, podcasting, audiobooks, radio, talk format of any kind is getting more and more consumed. That's what they're finding out. And then, with music initially mentioned, the listenership has fallen off. 80% of respondents listening spent on songs in 2014, the remaining 20% to spoken word audio. Now is dipped to 72% and 28% listening more to talk over music. They also broke it down by gender. Men in 2021, 32% of their time listening to spoken word content, 24% for women, which is an increase from 2014. Same music audio listenership share also turned in a boost for those for older audiences, ages 35 to 54. And then those 55 and up also had an increase in listening to more spoken word audio. Now, when it comes to trends in non-music audio entertainment, podcasting, which Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple, and others have invested heavily, and they're offering paid subscriptions as part of those plans now, they've experienced a 278% hike in mobile device listening timeshare. Now, the other thing, too, is that we're having a lot more creators out there. Daniel Ek of Spotify fame, the CEO, noted in February during an event called Stream On, he thinks the platform can attract north of 50 million creators by 2025. There have already been 300,000 podcasts that have been added to Spotify since the third quarter of 2021. Podcast engagement has nevertheless hovered around 25%. Competition for listeners appears poised to be ramping up moving forward, and oversaturation may become a concern. Well, but that's what happens. You'll find some things that will kind of fade out in the distance after a while anyway. That's what will eventually happen. We know that that's pretty much to be true. So there's a couple of stories left I want to bring up before we're going to wrap things up. I was going to bring up one about in the news, but I'm going to just change off of that. There was an issue where they're trying to eliminate the whole idea where if you want to go ahead and subscribe to a publication, whether it's a digital paywall or it's a newspaper, you can go ahead and click to get signed up. But then if you want to go ahead and cancel, you have to go through the trouble of calling. And that's one of the things that we're talking about with that, which I thought, was an interesting story, but I'm going to hold off on that. Now, I talked about last week about Moviepass making its way back into theaters, and they're going to try to get themselves restarted again. So we got more details this week about it. The co-founder, Stacy Spikes, details relaunch plans. For starters, it's not going to be $10 a month. It's funny. So that's one thing that was said. Now, Spikes spoke with TheWrap.com, sidestepped the question about Moviepass's tarnished brand about the struggling service charging subscription terms after shutting down in September 2019. He hopes to restore the customer-first approach of its earlier days. Quote, at the end of the day, the playbook is great service, great product, reliability, transparency, meeting with consumers on a regular basis. All those things that we did before, but that made the company great and exciting and worthy of an acquisition before, that was radically changing the industry. We want to bring those back. So think of it like this. This is them basically saying, we're not going to be what Napster was. We're not going to disrupt an industry and then just get swallowed up because we couldn't stay alive. They want to go and keep it going. That's the plan. So they said what will be the same is that the app, which allows its users to sync their phones with their Red Moviepass credit cards so they can use subscriptions effectively at any movie theater, that will remain the same. And yes, Spikes expects that to be the time being. You will still have to use that physical credit card at theaters, but the company's new website, it may no longer be red. So they might just change the color scheme. Now, they have not talked about if there were going to be any personal information data or emails from the previous regime. So you'll have customers re-signing up from scratch. So you're not going to have the existing base of subscribers that were part of it to get them back to adopt. You're going to now have all new adopters ready from day one. But it did cause premium reward programs and subscription services from all the major theaters, AMC Theaters, Regal, Cinemark, Marcus, Alamo Drafthouse, and Showcase Cinemas. So the new Moviepass he envisions will have options for those who want to attend a single theater and those who want options to visit any theater. He hopes that Moviepass will be able to coexist and even operate alongside some of the exhibitors' own subscription offerings. So there's that part. Now, one other story I want to bring up is a study that was brought up about spoken word audio. Podcasting is spoken word audio and music and how it's being consumed. So a new study came in, Spoken Word Audio Report, which was published by NPR and Edison Research. Here's what they learned about. They spoke with over 4,000 individuals ages 13 and up as part of an overarching listening habits study. 1,000 interviews were conducted among those who listen to spoken word audio at least once per month. So they say right now, the amount of people listening to spoken word audio, whether it's on radio or it's podcasting or audiobooks, is 48%. 48% for U.S. residents over the age of 13. Now they break it down. There's AM/FM radio. The parties behind the report stated against 22% for podcast, 10% for audiobooks, and 20% for other. So they did try to break it up between certain devices or certain styles. Now, they also found out that a full 75% of the U.S. online population, ages 18 and up, have listened to spoken word audio content, with 45% of the 330 million residents, ages 13 and up, having listened to spoken word entertainment daily. So podcasting, audiobooks, radio, talk format of any kind is getting more and more consumed. That's what they're finding out. And then with music initially mentioned, the listenership has fallen off. 80% of respondents listening spent on songs in 2014. The remaining 20% to spoken word audio. Now it's dipped to 72% and 28% listening more to talk over music. They also broke it down by gender. Men in 2021, 32% of their time listening to spoken word content, 24% for women, which is an increase from 2014. Same music audio listenership share also turned in a boost for those for older audiences, ages 35 to 54. And then those 55 and up also had an increase in listening to more spoken word audio. Now, when it comes to trends in non-music audio entertainment, podcasting, which Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple, and others have invested heavily, and they're offering paid subscriptions as part of those plans now, they've experienced a 278% hike in mobile device listening timeshare. Now, the other thing, too, is that we're having a lot more creators out there. Daniel Ek of Spotify fame, the CEO, noted in February during an event called Stream On, he thinks the platform can attract north of 50 million creators by 2025. There have already been 300,000 podcasts that have been added to Spotify since the third quarter of 2021. Podcast engagement has nevertheless hovered around 25%. Competition for listeners appears poised to be ramping up moving forward, and oversaturation may become a concern. Well, but that's what happens. You'll find some things that will kind of fade out in the distance after a while anyway. That's what will eventually happen. We know that that's pretty much to be true. There is one other story I'm going to bring up before we wrap things up, and that's Taylor Swift. This was a little interesting story. iHeartRadio is trying to play, favorites and trying to do something really nice, which we probably know that, there's probably a lack of royalties by what they're doing this. Like, it's more of a cost-cutting measure for them. So, iHeartMedia stations now are only going to play the new versions of Taylor Swift songs, the ones that are being newly recorded. So, any songs you hear of Taylor Swift will be Taylor's version, the ones that were not done when she started her career, when she was with Scooter Braun and the whole thing that was going on there. So, that's being done there. Now, Fox Business reports that iHeartMedia confirmed radio stations will replace all of Taylor's personal albums with the Taylor's version of each of them as Taylor releases each project, and will only play Taylor's version of her songs on the air. Tom Pullman, Chief Programming Officer for iHeartMedia, says, quote, "Whenever Taylor records a track, we will immediately replace the old versions. Our stations will always deliver songs that artists are eager to share and fans want to hear." Yeah, right. Like I said, there's probably something with the royalties they could probably save on by playing the newer versions of the songs as opposed to the older songs based on various rules and regulations about it. So on this past Friday, Swift debuted her expanded re-recorded album Red, which includes a 10-minute version extended of All Too Well, which is making its runs virally. And you have songs like 22 and We're Never Ever Getting Back Together that have been re-recorded. So Swift has been re-recording her first 6 albums because her original masters were sold by her prior label, and she wanted to create new masters she could own herself, which is very commendable. I've talked about before in the program. So in fall 2019, Swift revealed that Scooter Braun's Ithaca Holdings owned her master recordings and announced in June that she acquired Big Machine Label Group, label led by Scott Borchetta and home to Swift's first 6 albums. And Braun paid $300 million to the label for her music, essentially. And Braun, who's been managing Grammy winners including Ariana Grande, Justin Bieber, and Tori Kelly, wrote a lengthy post on social media that he's made calls to have an open discussion with Swift and squash her differences, but it's been rejected. And the singer, she hasn't heard a word from him, she says. There we go. Fun stuff. I'm going to leave it there. That's the show for this week. Thanks for listening in, as you always do. Come back for another Broadcasters podcast. Until next week, remember the content is king, and the control of your content is in your hands.
Thank you for listening to the Broadcasters Podcast. Find all the links to subscribe to the show by going to broadcasterspodcast.com. And don't forget to check out the King of Podcasts wrestling program, the Wrestling is Real podcast, exclusively at wrestlingisreal.com.